Before we get started, I do have a question.
Yep.
After we're done today, what is the next step?
Mm-hmm.
What happens with this process along the way? And as far as time frame, what do you think we're looking at?
Yeah, that is a hard thing to answer because I could see this taking longer to make something more thorough and more deeply reported, as opposed to just a one-off, one episode of something somewhere. I think this is something that I would want to take my time with and that deserves to be told in a more long-form way. Please give it up for Jordan Ashwood, Thomas Danielian, Kara Andrew, Caleb Green, and Mike Mosquito. Hello. I'm Amory Sivertson. And from WBUR and ZSP Media, this is Beyond All Repair, live at WBUR CitySpace. Thank you so much for being here. I am not the MC of this event, so it is time to bring up the actual MC herself, Meghna Chakrabarti. She's got to get her Beyonce earpiece. Okay, you're good.
My Beyonce earpiece?
Yeah.
Before we start, I just want to say something about Amory Sivertson. I've known her for a very long time. How many years is it now?
13.
It's 13?
Yeah. 2011. January 24th, 2011 was my first day as an intern on the local news show that Meghna hosted at the time, Radio Boston.
You see how special she is.
And she was interviewing John Kerry and at like 9 a.m. and I had gotten there and you were prepping, but you also wanted to greet me warmly, and it was professional admiration from first to low for me, truly.
Well, Amory's actually scooped me here because what I was going to say about you is it's not that often in life that upon not just first impression, but like first microsecond impression, you realize that you're in the presence of someone very special. And Amory is one of those people. And I meet a lot of people on a day-to-day basis just by virtue of the job I'm privileged to do, but from the get-go, this woman struck me as brilliant, hardworking, funny as heck, a very, very, very committed journalist, and a profoundly decent human being. And to the point where when I finally got a chance to meet Amory's parents, I'm dragging this out, but I never get to do this about you in public. I said, Mr. and Mrs. Sivertson, by the way, one of them's here, Mr. Sivertson. How? Because I'm a mom too. I'm like, do you have a handbook? Because I want to buy that handbook. How did you make this? And they said she just came out that way.
Lies.
No.
Oh, lies. Lies.
Okay, but anyway, I don't want to. I do actually want to take up our entire time talking about how amazing you are, but I won't. Because there's, of course, another person who is integral to the creation of this podcast. So please welcome the editor of the series and the namesake of WBUR's partner on the project, ZSP Media, Zac Stuart-Pontier. Hello. Hey. I had pretty good vibes from Zac from the start, too. Which I just met him like 5 minutes ago, so.
It's been a good 5 minutes so far.
Okay, so before we dive in to learning much more about this podcast, I want to let everyone here know that, of course, you can submit your own questions by going to, as you see, slido.com and enter Beyond All Repair, one word, and then type in your questions. Tap in your questions that way, and we'll be going through some of them here over the course of this evening. And Zac, fans of crime stories will also know you, got to give you props for this, as the co-host of the podcast Crime Town and as one of the executive producers of HBO's The Jinx, which just finished its second season.
I heard some like, ooh, he did? In the crowd.
So I know that Amory's been teasing me for years about this incredible story that she was working on, but how did you come to the story that became Beyond All Repair?
Amory and I had a meeting about something else, and it turned out to be the day after your first interview with Sophia, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I had a former colleague who was working with Zac on something and said, I feel like you two should just know each other. And that our first conversation was, the day after I had the first conversation with Sophia on the record, because we had talked a couple weeks before, and she had put this box of tapes in the mail for me. She and Morgan had. And so I had mentioned to Zac when I spoke to him the next day, I just got a box of trial footage. And Zac, as we have just established, he's kind of a video guy. And I saw his eyes kind of light up at the thought that the trial footage still exists from 2003. That's what this box is, from 2003.
I'm an archival guy. I like
Okay.
it doesn't have to be video.
Okay, fair enough.
No, I was intrigued by the story and was excited about meeting Amory, and just like, it seemed like she was at the beginning of an incredible journey, and I was jazzed to be included.
Yeah. Well, so glad that the two of you partnered together along with the rest of the very talented folks who worked with you in the creation of this podcast. So all of you remember from that first episode about the box, I was like, wow, I wish I could see a lot of this trial footage, but guess what? You get to see some of it tonight, because we're going to watch a couple of excerpts. But before we do that, I do want to go back to the beginning of the series and how that first episode opens, because structure overall, like it was like a masterclass for me in structuring long form journalism, but it's pretty important. So let's just take a listen.
Shane, you have no idea how much I'm trying to protect you, little brother. You don't know it yet, but you're being misled.
Mr. Shane, good morning, how you doing? Listen to me carefully. You're not ready for what will come down if you don't stop your nonsense and keep away.
If you guys attempt to sabotage or to trouble me in any which way or to try to slow down my life, I'm gonna fight you guys.
You don't know what you're playing with, okay?
I wanted nothing to do with it in the beginning, and up to now, I still want nothing to do with it.
Stop talking shit about me and don't lie on me.
But I'm not going to let anybody lie on me, okay?
Okay? You're worse than Judas. You're wicked.
All I'm doing is I'm giving you fair fucking warning. If you come at me, I'm going to destroy you, dude.
Why did you start that way?
Well, we originally didn't. And by we, I guess I mean I, because we were pretty close to releasing the first couple of episodes. And Zac had a note. We originally started much closer to how episode 2 starts, which is with Shane in his apartment, some of the earliest voice memos that he sent me going through the case file. And it was a very intimate opening, and I really liked it. But Zac had a note that was, this story is going to get so big, and so to start more intimate, we could leave it this way, but what if we just tried another? It was almost like a prompt, like a writing prompt for me. It's like, what would this sound like if you tried a bigger opening? Do you remember?
Yeah, totally. And I also remember thinking that like we were going to really get to know Shane in that first episode, and there might even be even more power to what was a really cool, interesting opening with him going through the case file, and we could use that in number 2.
Mm-hmm. The sneaky thing that Zac doesn't know is that he had sent me a film that he was working on, and was like, "Hey, I'm working on this with the editors, and it's just in drafts. Would you want to look at this and just tell me what you think?" So I watched this film, and the way this documentary starts is you see an empty house that clearly there was a family living there, and they're no longer there, and there's an older man walking you through the house, showing you this is where the kids would play by the pool, and then you see home video footage of the kids by the pool, and it's very effective at saying something has changed here, and we don't know where this family is, we don't know why, but you're seeing this bigger you're seeing the aftermath of something. And so in putting this together, my thinking is like, what is the empty house? Or where do we end up at the end of this? And it's not the total ending, but we do get to this point where I'm finally talking to George and Sean, and George and Sean are then sending messages to Shane and Sophia that are very hard to listen to. So that was my interpretation of how do we show people where it's going a little more at the beginning.
It does a lot. The opening does a lot. It also introduces you as the character and as the voice, which is, I think, it's a really beautiful opening.
So, whenever covering quite a serious event like a murder, there's the mechanics of the details around the murder, but every single time something terrible like this happens, really the story is about the people, right? The people who have been impacted by what happened and the family members involved. And I think over the course of the 10 episodes, you take time to really let us learn as much as is possible within the framework of something like a podcast about the people whose lives have been permanently impacted by Marlene's murder. So let's talk about obviously Sophia and Shane, her brother, 2 of the, I guess technically 4, but 2 of the 3 siblings who were at the heart of this story. How did it actually happen that Shane was going to be digging into the case file along with you, Amory?
Well, that wasn't certain at the beginning because I was just getting the materials. Shane had said, if you want to talk to Sophia, here's her contact information. You can reach out to her. We're seeing Sophia and a very young Shane in the early 90s, and then the 2 of them in 2014 here up on the screen. But I didn't know if Shane would want to look into this, but I did tell him, I'm getting these materials. If you want them, I will share them with you. And also there's, Shane is, if we can go to the next slide, Shane had, in my opinion, I said to him, you have a unique perspective because you grew up with these 2 siblings, these 2 people that are at the center of what we know about, what we've known about this murder thus far. So again, you have Shane on Sophia's lap there, and Sean is behind them. And then you have the 4 siblings, one of whom we've tried to block out the identifying part of his face because he did not want to be a part of the series. which is my respect. So, and that's in the late 90s. So it just felt like he had a perspective that if he wanted to share it, it could offer insight into who he knew Sophia to be growing up and who he knew Sean to be growing up. So,
Did you want to add to that, Zach? Okay. I do want to say that I was expecting to hear a lot more about the actual murder in the first episode, but when I reached the end of it, I really, really, really appreciated learning more about Shane in particular. And I admired him deeply in hearing the story that you tell about, here's a gentleman who has encountered incredible adversity in his life. I don't think I could have sort of withstood a day of all the challenges that he faced, and has built this, and even coming through that has built, a professional career, has built a life, and is on a, he has been and is on a path to, on a path of dignity. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. And so I just really admired him, and I appreciated that was the first time we were introduced to Shane, because then it made me think even more like, wow, he had all his personal challenges, and at the same time, as he's building his life, this happens, the murder happens, and the trial against the accusations against Sophia happens. So how hard, must that be to square what he knew of his sister and the care and love that she gave him when he was a young boy and a young man, versus what she was being accused of. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you experienced something similar as you were getting to know Sophia, because you talked to her a lot, right? So
countless.
There must have been times where you're like, the person I'm getting to know here doesn't seem like the person who would have ended up in court twice, for a grisly murder.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Sophia. I loved talking to Sophia. She's a great storyteller. I think we had a real rapport, and it was, in the very beginning, I'm trying to do just preliminary research before I talk to her, and so I'm just seeing. This is long before I had the case file. There's newspaper coverage of her. And there are pictures of her in the newspapers, and we have some of those visuals, because I describe in one of the episodes that the woman that showed up to our first video call, it was hard for me to say, yes, I see that this was, the woman who, these are pictures from the courtroom. And that's like a really just vulnerable, nobody wants those pictures of you taken. And you look at the Sophia that showed up to our first video call, that's on the far right side. And Sophia just she does not wear all of the things that I know happened to her and all of the things that she feels. She doesn't present that flat out. And so we spent a lot of time kind of breaking that down. And for me, it was every time she showed up, it didn't feel like I was talking to that person. But also, nobody really got to know that person on trial, I didn't feel like at the time. And so you see a picture in the newspaper, and it's easy to, we just judge. We make judgments about people. And I really wanted to try to break that down and start from zero if that was possible. So we did. We went. I think that first day I said, tell me about the day what day were you born? And we started from the beginning and worked our way through, and I wanted to try to get that out of my head and just focus on the woman across from me all the time.
Well, so speaking of this, the photograph from the trial there were so many questions I had about what actually took place at the first trial, and specifically, around the prosecution's star witness, who is Sean. because as he's giving his testimony that we hear in that episode, I just couldn't believe that he was on the stand saying that when he goes downstairs, he sees someone in a mask who he doesn't recognize, and then the person pulls off the mask and it's his sister, when he had just been with her minutes before. She's of diminutive stature and 6 months pregnant. I mean, it actually really stunned me. It stunned me. And so I'm not sure if I want to know did he expect us to believe, but clearly the prosecution and Shane expected the jury to believe that, right?
Sean, yes. The name.
Sorry, Sean. Forgive
okay.
me. Sean's testimony. Yeah, he expected the jury to believe that.
Yes, and I think the jury convicted her, and in the first trial, and that conviction was thrown out. But yes, it is hard to believe, and that's why I was by myself when I was talking to Buckner the last time. The piece of tape that you hear in the final episode when he says, that story about him coming down the stairs, bullshit, and I never expected to hear him say that to me directly, and to say, because Sean's responsible for the murder. And that felt like a punch to the gut for me, because it felt like, but this is the story you put on the stand. And not only that, we're going to show you a clip of the cross-examination of Sean. So this is Therese, Sophia's lawyer, talking to Sean on the stand, and you see how you just get a hint of how his story was shaped by the prosecution and by the detectives over a period of time. So here's that.
Mr. Correa, you testified yesterday that your sister opened the passenger door of the van for you to enter, correct?
Yes.
Are you sticking to that testimony today?
Yes, I am.
You didn't tell Detective Buckner that on the night of your arrest, did you?
No.
In fact, you told him that your sister simply said, "Hop in the van, Sean," correct?
Yes.
And it wasn't until April 2nd, 2002, when you were interviewed by the prosecutor's office on videotape, that you say anything about Sophia Johnson being the one to open the passenger door to the van. Is that correct?
I guess so.
Because you had never told the detectives that in the prior interviews, had you?
I can't remember.
By the April 2nd interview, isn't it true, Mr. Correa, that you knew that the police had found blood on both handles of Marlene Johnson's van?
I don't remember. I was in jail.
And you couldn't have known that in the earlier interviews because the testing hadn't been completed, had it?
I don't know.
So yeah, it starts with just get in the van, and it turns into, as DNA evidence comes in, it seems clear that he was coached to say, no, not just get in the van. She had to open the door for you because there was blood found on the passenger side door handle. Mm-hmm. So there's just a refining of the story that happens by the time he takes the stand.
In the remainder of the video of his cross-examination, did Sophia's attorney really question Sean's credibility? Because, I mean, as I said, was there a line of questioning of, you expect us to believe that you didn't recognize your own sister? You're the one with the blood on your shoe. There's no blood found on Sophia. Come on, you can't be,
She doesn't ask about that specifically. She doesn't push on the, the stocking coming off. But there are certainly moments. There's a lot of, do you remember telling the detectives this kind of moment? And he'll say, no, I don't know. And she'll show him the transcript of his first interview. And she said, read this for me. So then he'll read what he said to detectives in original interviews. Then she'll say, but now you're saying this, right? And he'd say, yes. And she'd say, which is the truth, Sean? Which is the truth? And he'd say, what I'm saying today. And that was his answer every time.
Well, we actually have a pertinent audience question here about why were Sean's crimes and alleged crimes and continued alleged crimes not explored further? I don't know if that means in the context of the podcast series or in court. So let's do you have an answer about the in court part?
In court, yes. So we touch on this in the third episode, which is when you hear some of the pre-trial hearings, where Therese, Sophia's lawyer, is trying to bring up several things. There's a hit and run on Sean's record. That's not alleged. There's he has theft charges. Cynthia, his then wife at the time of the murder, had tried to get a restraining order against Sean, and she's trying to bring all of this up in trial, but the judge ultimately decides that it's not relevant to the murder case specifically. His history, she's really trying to say, she brings up the siblings' relationship, that Sean was mad at Sophia for taking in Cynthia for a period of time and her daughter. And the judge isn't buying that there was this, or she's not finding it relevant, that the relationship between the siblings is not relevant. Yeah. Therese really tried.
But she does rule that Sophia's prior arrests and stuff were relevant. So it's a little...
Yes, yeah, because the prosecution says, well, this is part of the motive. This is part of our, the motive that we believe was behind the murder, money.
So one other quick question about that first trial, because I really appreciated how you give us clear insight into the imperfect decisions, right, that are made in the process of an investigation and a trial. Now, I'm not saying that imperfect might be generous in certain cases, but nevertheless, you do say in the podcast that prosecutors, defense attorneys want to protect their client, prosecutors want to win, right? Because they're thinking of the victim and the victim's families. And so I actually appreciated how it was not an ideal case, but you explain that the prosecution seems to think that because they have this supposed eyewitness, right, in Sean, that gave them a greater chance of winning in court than if they had actually, tried him as the only person with physical evidence on him. We might object to that now, but when I heard you explain that, I tried to put myself, again, in the shoes of a lawyer for the state who's trying to figure out, well, what's my path to success here that will, as we say, give justice for this family.
Right. And they believed that they would have an easier time cooperating Sean. And this is, before Sophia's arrested. I'm trying to remember the full timeline here, but, they didn't know, the DNA testing hadn't come back. They didn't know when they decide to cooperate Sean that they're going to find blood on his boot.
Oh, interesting.
And what they
made the decision before the labs came back.
Yeah.
Oh.
They record that wiretapped phone call the day of Marlene's funeral. It's just 3 days after the murder, and they are being told a story by Sean. Someone has called in Sean. They've gotten an anonymous call saying, you need to look into this guy. They have Susie, Sean's girlfriend, who is telling the same story that Sean is telling them about driving them over to Marlene's house. And so they have Susie and Sean saying one thing, and what they would say is, we just could not make sense of why Sean would be there without Sophia. Sean had been to the Johnsons' house one time before, I should say. He told detectives that he was driven there by Brad. He didn't know how to get there, but he had been there one time before. But they still felt like, we just don't have a connection without Sophia.
I think that's it. It was her mother-in-law. And that feels like what really colored those early decisions by the police.
And also Sean knows about money in the house, and they can't make sense of how he would know about money in the house.
Interesting. Well, now I want you to do a follow-up about those prosecutorial decisions. Because did you say that on the podcast? I didn't realize that they hadn't received the labs back from the boot before they decided, okay. Well, and actually here we have 3. A picture of it, right?
Yeah, so this is just putting a visual to, obviously, things that you've heard about. But these are the fireplace tongs. They're about 20 inches long. And then that's Sean's boot. It's a black Timberland, so the blood probably would have been hard for him to notice but the little white circles are showing where it's found on the boot.
Okay. So I would like you to explain, if you could, the conversation that you had with Sean, the call that you had with Sean, and how it came about. Because to be perfectly transparent, I was nervous for you as I was listening, genuinely. So what was that call like?
I was nervous too. We had a lot of conversations leading up to the call about, I think this was something that we did further on in the series, that it was kind of before I was going to make a call, there was a goal to the call. And, I had many, many questions for Sean, obviously, but kind of the first goal is try to keep him talking to me, try to ease in a way that he will feel like I'm not coming out of the gate with accusations. But I did want him to respond to, you hear some very painful accusations about abuse that come up later in the series. I wanted to be able to put those to him, to respond to those. I obviously wanted to ask about the murder, but I needed him to stay on the phone with me. So yeah, I'd say I was nervous, and I didn't know if it would be combative or if he would come out in kind of a charming way, which I would say he did. The conversation started very, charming on its surface, of him saying, well, I'm also here to listen. So bring me your questions. And there's a little bit of a talking to Sean and talking to Sophia. It's like you're talking to one or the other of them in the upside down. Not that one is good and one is bad, and it's that definitive, but it's that they're saying many of the same things about each other. And so I wanted to listen back to something that we hear Sophia say, I think in the very first episode, which is, Sophia and I started talking in 2021, and then we had a conversation on the 20th anniversary is the wrong word, but, it was 20 years to the day that her mother-in-law was killed. So January 10th, 2022. And this is what Sophia said to me.
I'm 23 years old in my head. And this is 2002. And you know what I thought? I thought, it's January 10th. And whoever did this to her, do they know that it's January 10th?
So, Sophia is hesitant to say that she thinks Sean committed the murder, because she will say first, I wasn't there, I don't know. But if the implication is that if she didn't do it, Sean did it. I had another call with Sean, which was much more contentious. In the series, you only hear excerpts from the first call, but that second call was much more contentious, I would say. And I decided to make that second call on January 10th, 2024. So here's a snippet of that.
So I'll ask you a question, Amory.
Yep.
Can any of this that you're doing fix my life? Can it honestly repair the damage that's been done? I mean, if you were in my position, you had to go through all of that stuff. You lose your family, you lose your life. You have to start over. Even today is January 10th, right? Today is January 10th. I think it's 22 years ago that nonsense happened? 22 years ago, my life was destroyed because of somebody else's bullshit.
So I didn't prompt him. He didn't, I didn't say it's January 10th, but he, at the very least, and this might not say anything at all, right? This is a momentous thing in everyone's life who was involved, but he clearly did know that this was the date.
Yeah.
So if that was the question, does Sean, Sean probably has no idea, he's off living his life. Well, he at least did know that it was January 10th.
Okay. I think we do actually have time for this, because in the bits of your conversation with Sean that we heard in the podcast, mean, knowing how these things go, it's just a tiny fraction
Yeah.
of of the length and the nature of the conversation I'm sure you had with him. So I'm wondering if there's something that you didn't include in the podcast that that helped you, that can help us get a better sense of what you heard from Sean.
Yes, I think. Well, I mentioned that second call being more combative, and because I was putting allegations to him, I can understand that. But it was when I was putting the allegations of domestic violence that Cynthia makes, and we hear from her in chapter 3 of the podcast. It was clear that he did eventually address them and deny those allegations, but it took a long time and many detours, and they all went back to Sophia. So here's that.
I'm bringing it to you as an allegation, and it's your
Yes,
right to say it didn't happen.
So what you're attempting to do to me right now is to throw allegations at me. What, to make me upset?
No, I'm trying.
To fuck
I
with
want.
my head or something. What?
I'm
just really trying to figure out what the real purpose here is. It can't be the truth, because the truth's been out there.
Not about this. I'm asking about Cynthia. I'm asking about Cynthia. I'm not asking about the murder.
What you're trying to do is what? Not like
Anthony,
protect Sophia?
when somebody makes an allegation to me.
What the truth is, Miss, if the truth is out there already and you are still requesting, and Sophia is saying one thing and I'm saying one thing, the best thing that they should do is take that shit back to court.
Anthony, let her
This does not say what she has to say.
This does not have to do with the murder.
And whatever legal repercussions have to come behind it, let it come behind it.
So, Zac, I want to bring you back in here because, of course, as Amory's doing this reporting and having these conversations, you're hearing, all of this tape and conversations. I wonder sort of what your reactions were as the reporting was developing.
I think we always wanted to give the audience the experience of like not quite knowing who to believe, and so I think when I was reacting to stuff, I was just very conscious of organizing the information into like, oh, this makes me feel like I believe Sean more, or this makes me feel like I believe Sean less, and then trying to think not so much about what I believe, but then like in crafting the story, how are we going to like create that journey for the audience?
And I'd say that journey is a genuine one. I mean, there are things. When someone is trying to make you feel crazy for believing something, and this was a tactic that I picked up on more so from Sean, but he would say, when I was putting allegations to him, and I don't know how much of this I don't remember how much of this made it into the episode, but when I was putting the allegations that Shane had told me to Sean, the tactic seemed to be, you're telling me that blah, 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 that this happened, and you believe that? Like, that's the undertone of that when you put the question back to you in that way. And so when you're talked to in that way, and when you're being made to feel like, look, if you believe him, you're nuts. Look, if you believe her, you're being played. You do. I think I'm a pretty centered person, and I still felt tugged in different directions all the time. And so this idea of, where are you left feeling now? It's not let's just make them think this. Let's just make them think that. That is like, I still feel that day to day, and it's
Totally.
hard.
It was an absolutely genuine swing that everybody on the team was going through as we were discussing this and how to tell the story and how to give an accurate representation of that to the people that were going to listen to it. Right?
I mean, that's the literal definition of being gaslit, right?
Yeah. Well, and people saying, well, you don't know Sophia. Well, you don't know Sean. And you're getting that on both sides. And I guess it's not the upside down. It's just the being tugged over here and being made to feel like you're being played no matter what you believe. And that is just frustrating.
2 references to Stranger Things there. Also, just as a quick note, because in those excerpts from your conversations with Sean, of course, you're referring to him as Anthony because
Yes, Anthony
in his
Snow.
current life, he's Anthony Snow.
Anthony Snow. Mm-hmm.
And Anthony is his middle name.
Anthony is, at birth he was Sean Anthony Correa.
Okay.
And where did Snow come from?
Well, he told me, that would be a fun thing to play. We can't do it because I don't have it for you, but I'm sorry. But he told me that when he went back to Guyana, that he was, I've heard different stories, but the one that he told me is that when he went back to Guyana, he was, I don't know if teased, made fun of, people at least commented on him being, talking like a white boy and behaving more like a white boy because he grew up in the United States. He came to the United States when he was 2, maybe. So he said that Snow was kind of a nickname for him down there, and then he just ended up embracing it. Or maybe if it wasn't, he was called White Boy, and he said, well, what's whiter than snow? So.
Well, so let's take a little bit of a slight tangent because there's other people in the podcast that I would love to actually meet in person because they just sound like such interesting people. Lynn and Linda. In chapter 4, I was like, who are these delightful women? You've said that Lynn might be the MVP of the series. Why is that?
Because Lynn has a gift to, she was very good friends with Marlene and Richard Johnson. And she also was not willing to, and she was very supportive of, Marlene, there's Lynn on the left. And also, if you remember, Lynn wrote, it's an unpublished book, but she wrote a novelized version of really the story of Marlene's murder and her trials because she attended every single day of the trial. And this is, even though it's unpublished, she sent me a PDF, and this is the art for the A-frame murder. But Lynn really always, it seemed like she always kept an open mind and that she wasn't just willing to believe something because that's what her dear friend, Richard Johnson, believed. And, Richard died last December, and he died believing with his whole heart that Sophia killed his wife. And I know that broke Sophia's heart to know that he wouldn't get to hear this. But Lynn also, if there are any Beyond members out here, you would have heard this particular piece of tape that I'm going to play. But Lynn has she's lived her own life, and she said that she respects the way that Sophia has managed her life, has found a way to manage her life. And they have something in common to some extent. So here she is talking about that.
I want her to remember something, even if I never get to tell her myself. As one mother to another who did not have the luxury of holding her baby at birth, I want her to know that it was 38 years before my daughter Denise was ready to look for me. And I want her not to despair that Ethan may take decades to want to know her. And I hope that she won't give up hope for that.
What were you thinking when she told you that?
Just that she so wants to talk to Sophia, and she wants to, she sees the humanity in all of this. That she doesn't just she would never just take Richard Johnson's word for it. She went to the trial because she could, and she was there as a sign of support, but she's also a very curious person and has said, I wish I had your job, or I want to be a private investigator. And she also, I just think, sees the whole person in a way that we so often have a hard time doing. And I was striving for that in how I tried to tell this story. And I hope I got there to some extent, but I will always be striving to see the whole person in the way that Lynn does.
Well, we have another question from the audience. Actually, it has to do with a lot with how you research a story or a case like this. So the question is, while going over older cases, what forensics stick out to you as researchers? What do you give weight to in your mind versus something to be looked into further? Essentially, how do you know which rabbit holes to dive down into?
You don't. Do you want to take this?
I feel like it's always, you never know, right? You just kind of go down as many of them as you can and follow up as much as you can and try to cross-check and cross-reference as much as possible.
Yeah. I'm one of those people who keeps too many tabs open on my phone. And I had a lot of tabs for a while that were representative of some of the rabbit holes, including, the forensic expert that we hear from in Chapter 6, the one who said, the assailant would have had to have been at least more like 5'11" and likely left-handed based on the direction of the blood spatter on the wall. You talk to someone like Kevin Harper, and Kevin Harper says, no, that was baloney, that forensic analysis. We didn't buy that for a second. Now, he did say we should have gone after Sean from the beginning because there was blood on his boot, and it's actually very hard to get blood on your boot. But this is what Kevin Harper said. It actually would have been very hard for him to get blood on his boot where it was on his boot if he hadn't been closer to Marlene and more involved. But he didn't buy Kay Sweeney's forensic analysis at all. And he said, I did a week-long blood spatter class. Have you ever done a blood spatter class? And I said, I have not. And he said, well, you should. And I looked up blood spatter classes, and I still have that tab open on my phone. I'm certain of it. Because, would a week-long blood spatter class make me more qualified than Kay Sweeney? No, but I was certainly interested in it. I also thought about handwriting samples because there are journal entries of Sophia's in the case file, and then we have the handwritten confession in the Harper report. And I forget what it was, but there was something that I have a tab that is about handwriting analysis. I have a tab that's about 911. When you see the transcript of the 911 call that Sophia initiates, but then Brad comes on the phone, the kind of back channeling that the dispatcher is doing to the other officers, it says that both Sophia and Brad sound hinky. It says Brad first, he sounds hinky. Sophia sounds hinky, suspicious. This was not a familiar term to me. That was another tab, hinky. But they both
have to be a bit older to have understood the reference.
Is this like a dirty word? Should I not be saying this? Hinky. So that was another thing. It's like, do I get voice analysis is really, that's even more probably contentious than, or disputed than like a polygraph being used. But that used to be more popular, that let's listen to the sound of their voice. Do they sound guilty? Do they sound involved? So that's another tab on my phone. Is like, do I try to get a voice analysis in here, or do I let that go?
So we have another question, which I actually think gets to the heart of some of the dilemmas that not only you, but I think all journalists face every day. So this question is, true crime is reliant on something terrible happening to someone. What are your thoughts on the morality of showcasing such a painful event, and the person says, for entertainment?
I've thought a lot about this over the years, for sure. There's a lot, true crime is something that goes back forever. Crimes were popular in the early days. When somebody commits a crime, it sort of turns up the volume on everything in their life. And you sort of, all of a sudden you're looking at their life and you're saying, is this why this happened? And it makes every detail of somebody's life important in a way that is interesting. And I think what you strive to do is tell stories that are universal, even though they're really unique, that people that are experiencing stuff in their own life will look at this and get something out of it. I think that's something that I think a lot about. We certainly thought a lot about that in regards to the ending. Like, what could this story, what's the takeaway, and what did we want to talk about, and what's the universal thing that we could talk about? So I don't know. It's a struggle, and I think we strive to do it with respect.
Yeah, and I'd say this is my first and maybe my last, I don't know, foray into this genre, because it didn't start as a genre. It didn't start as, let's try to tell a true crime story. This happened because we made an episode of Endless Thread, which is the podcast that I co-host with Ben Brock Johnson, who's one of the other editors and executive producers on the show. And Ben and I, for a totally different show, had made an episode with Shane and about his life. And Shane had mentioned in that interview that, you know, one of the notches on his kind of timeline of a very traumatic upbringing is that his sister is charged with murder when he's 13 years old. And so when he reached back out to me and said that she wanted to tell her story, I said, sure, I'll send her an email and we'll have a conversation. And from those early conversations, it really felt like, wow, this is a woman who, if she's telling, she may have been telling the truth for 20 years and no one has believed her. And what a horrible feeling. And it's a horrible feeling as a woman, it's a horrible feeling as a person to just have nobody believe you. And again, like I said, you're being made to feel like you're crazy. And so that really resonated with me. It's just this woman who has never been believed. And then once I started requesting the case file, it's like, it becomes more real that this is a real story. So all of which is to say, I'm not a true crime journalist, but I wanted to hear this woman out, and the story is a crime-related story, and so I tried to do it with as much compassion as I could.
If I may, I would like to add a couple of thoughts just in my own experience. I don't do true crime, but first and foremost, I mean, none of this happened without the consent of the people you spoke to. Mm-hmm. Like, so there's, you know, clearly, we don't hear this because it's not necessarily part of what the podcast needs to say, but you get consent about, like, can I ask you these questions? Can I record it, et cetera, et cetera. So everyone who is participating in a reporting project like this is doing so of their own volition. I think that's very, very important to talk about, because there is a chance to think, well, these people who have suffered so profoundly, and they are being exploited. But on the other hand, I can completely understand why people want to participate in a project like this, because there is the potential for exoneration. Let's not forget that. That has happened to folks. Mm-hmm. Obviously, especially in the second season of In the Dark. Have you guys heard that?
If not, listen.
If not, definitely listen to In the Dark. It is an incredible podcast. You know, a man who had been tried 9 times for the same crime.
6, but yeah.
6? 6, because he was going to be tried for the 7th time, but the Supreme Court ruled in his favor, right? He was ultimately freed from prison because of the work done on that podcast, I would say. So that's also a potential outcome. We don't know when reporters start these projects or try to pursue the truth. You don't know what's going to happen. And from my experience, again, I don't do true crime, but I can't tell you how many people I have invited onto my show to speak to 5 million people live and share the terrible things that have happened to them. Their homes got bombed. Every member of their family died, right? I mean, this is very recent. Family members were kidnapped and they haven't seen them since October 7th. Or during COVID, like, they haven't been able to leave the house and everyone they know died. Or I can give you example after example after example. Should we not do that? Bad things happen to us as human beings. And I think we are compelled to try to understand why. And I honor the bravery of every single person who sits down in front of a microphone, whether it's for a podcast or a broadcast radio show, and makes themselves vulnerable and believes by sharing my story, I hope that other people can learn why bad things happen to us as people. Because we want to know, we have to try to understand these things. So to me, that's the moral calculus I make. Is there, like you said, a broader set of lessons that we can all take away from this person making themselves vulnerable so that we come out of the process as better people or more thoughtful people? So in that sense, I don't consider it entertainment. It's not fiction. I know it weighs heavily on these two and it weighs heavily on myself every day, but if people like Amory don't do that, who will? Who else, as she said, would have given Sophia the chance over hundreds of hours and many, many years, in fact, of investigation to be heard in a way she'd never been heard before? So I just want to say that as a defense for the accusation that this is entertainment. Again, like I said, 2 or 3 times a week, someone comes on my show, and they are really taking a chance. And we take it, we treasure that bravery, and we take it with utmost seriousness to treat that person with respect and decency. And like I said, that's why I use the word decent with Amory, because she's the most decent human being I've ever met. So my soapbox is creaking underneath the weight of my soliloquy. So let's move on to other things that I really wanted to know about that you reveal in the series, in the podcast series. So you mentioned the Harper Report. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this one blew my mind because this is the 2010 report / confession, right, that Sophia makes to Agent Harper. So where in the reporting process were you when you received the report?
We were pretty far. We had 2 or maybe 3 episodes written. Sophia had told me that she had talked to Harper. I'd seen Harper's name throughout the case file. She told me that she confessed to Morgan and to Kevin Harper when he came down to see her in California. But there's a difference in what details were shared. So the very first thing that I did when I got the Harper report, well, first I cried a lot, and I brought my husband over and emoted before him. And you know what? We'll play some of this. This is not me and my husband. This is me 2 days later. I then tell the team about this, and all I've talked to Sophie Codner, who's here, producer Sophie Codner. She's here all the way from San Francisco. Sophie! So first I had a conversation just with Sophie, and where I told Sophie about the report, and then we decided we were obviously going to have a meeting about it because I was not expecting to read what I read, and we decided to record that meeting. It was a Zoom meeting. So this is me walking through the Harper report with the team.
And then they ask her if she's willing to make a written statement. And the last few pages of the report are, in Sophia's handwriting, a written confession to this version of events. So the absolutely baffling thing that Sophie and I, talked through this yesterday morning because I stayed up late and just read it Wednesday night and freaked out.
Well, yeah, tell me about what it was like for you to read this.
I was right here. I think I had my hand over my mouth the whole time, just breathing heavily and tearing up. And then I called Mike over and was like, I just need to talk to someone about this. And I did make a voice memo. And I said, fuck a lot.
Apologies to my dad, who is and would always tell me I can count on my hand the number of times that my dad let any kind of swear loose growing up, and he'd always say, "Oh, a daughter shouldn't have to hear his father talk that way." And now I'm like, a father shouldn't have to hear his daughter talk that way. Really shouldn't.
By the way, the woman who went like this in upper, that's Shannon Dooling, another investigative
Yes,
reporter.
you hear Shannon in episode 8.
Really, really great. Okay, so Zac, also for you, I'm wondering, we saw your reaction there. What was going through your mind?
I mean, I had some suspicion because they wanted to record the meeting, so I'm like gnawing on a toothpick, which is what I do when I get like nervous, I guess. I don't know. I mean, it's just sort of the moment that you're, I guess, hoping for. I mean, it's weird to say hoping for, but I don't know that we ever thought we would get to as much of a answer that we got to, I guess. So I was surprised and shocked, and then immediately like, okay, that's going to change 6 a little bit and 7.
Oh yeah, the structure really got blown up. But I guess the hope in it, if there is like hope in reading something like that, is you just want, like I'm talking about with the pull of the what to believe, you just want more information. You just want something that is going to paint a fuller picture. And the very first thing that I did after this meeting, or maybe even before, was go back to, wait. What did Sophia and Morgan tell me about the report? I know they told, or not the report. I'm not sure if they were aware that a physical report existed. And it's Kevin Harper who says, if you can find my notes, I have a much better chance of remembering any of this. Because this would not have been part of the regular case file. So I go back to my conversations with Sophia and Morgan about, I remember her telling me that she confessed to Morgan she was trying to get back to prison, but what did she say? What did they both tell me about that confession? And the way that confession went on tape back then is Sophia says, I told them I did it. Go and tell them I did it. And Morgan says, and that was it. I left. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't want to know anything else. And so then to read this 26-page report and to have, this is, 2 of the 4 pages of the handwritten confession, I just didn't know what to do with myself. It was so detailed and it was so far from go and tell them I did it and, Morgan telling me that was it. And it, memory is hard, but even when I asked them about it closer to the present day, it was, Sophia says, I did give him all those details. I needed him to tell a convincing story. And he doesn't remember it that way. And so memory's hard. You can't always square those things, but reading this, I really did feel like I know this is what happened. And I can understand what she's told me, that she wanted to get back to prison, but I still think that I still find this very chilling.
Was there a moment even before, because this came actually pretty deep into your reporting process. Mm-hmm. Was there a moment even before the Harper report that, let's say, your frustrations with Sophia mounted?
There was another moment of a discrepancy between something that she had told you and then a letter that you had found?
Yes, there's, finding out that she had lied on the stand was challenging because, she, in talking to me, the idea is that no one has ever heard my side of the story. This is Sophia saying, no one has ever heard me tell the story. And I didn't take the stand. I didn't speak. They just heard Sean's story. And so I obviously heard, what she would say today happened the day of the murder. But then to hear her have the opportunity to tell her side of the story on the stand, and she tells a different story, was frustrating. And the way that she remembers it is that she made up that story on the stand, that her lawyer did not know that she was going to tell this story on the stand. And that really surprised me before I had seen the trial footage, like, whoa, to change your story on the stand and to kind of, to have your lawyer, if you're the lawyer, you'd say, may we have a brief recess? I need to confer with my client, you know. So I'm watching the trial footage then of her testimony, which we'll watch a little bit of, and I'm just watching Therese. What is going through Therese's mind? What can I see on her face? So here's a little bit of Sophia on the stand.
What did Brad say to you, if anything, on the ride home?
That he hated this, that it keeps happening, and he wants to protect his mom, and that Richard was taking everything that she had. He wanted some help to scare her, so he asked me if I'd be willing to call my brother.
All right. So your husband tells you that he wants help in scaring Marlene?
Yes.
Did he tell you what he meant by that?
He said just verbally scaring her, letting her know that Richard had outstanding gambling debts, so it would be enough to persuade her to finally leave him.
How did you react to that? Now, first, when is this conversation happening?
In the car ride home.
And how did you react to that?
I don't know, I was numb. I didn't understand, but it made sense because she'd been wanting to leave him, and if he was going to be taking advantage of her, then of course we were going to help her.
So what did he ask you to do anything?
He asked me if I would call my brother and get his help.
Now, what was your brother's relationship with Brad?
Strained.
Strained?
Yes.
Did you wonder why Brad would want your brother to be involved in this?
Oh, I knew why, because Sean he had been in trouble before, and he probably wouldn't have been averse to scaring Marlene.
So there was a document that I was given later on that confirmed that Therese did know what she was going to say on the stand. Now, Therese no lawyer could ever allow their client to lie on the stand. They'd have their license pulled. But she did say to Sophia, there is a document where she says to Sophia, if you tell this story on the stand, and this is a few months before the trial begins, if you tell this story on the stand, you are swearing to me and to everyone that this is definitively what happened. And if it's not, I can't help you. So she did know. And that could just be, again, a lapse in memory, but Sophia was very insistent that she made it up on the stand. She didn't know that she was going to lie. She did it in the moment. And so if anything, it was just like wow, could any of us remember exactly how things happened that long ago? I don't know, but that in and of itself is unsettling.
Okay, so we're sort of headed towards the last couple of minutes here. Could go on and on and on. So many questions. Since obviously I know Amory very well, as I listened to each episode, I was like live texting her questions. So, but I do want to make note that Shane is here, and we were allowed to. He gave us permission to identify him, and I can't quite see. He's there. Shane, thank you so much for being here today. I know it can't be easy. I do feel a great deal of gratitude that you are here because, as people have asked and as we've discussed, human beings. This isn't a story about a murder. It's a story about your family. And so being here, I'm grateful for that. I'm just wondering if you had some thoughts that you wanted to share about how the podcast and what Amory has reported, how did it have an impact on you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And also the very kind regards. Like, I've been online and it's not been as kind, so I'll take what I can get. Also it's very odd to learn different aspects about my own family in such a public setting, even today. New context that I have to square away very quickly, and just understand what I can make do with. So in terms of how I'm doing, better than when this first happened and I had to go and live with my dad. So this is also like I have a better life looking at home for me. In terms of how I'm doing, honestly, I did have to take a break from my duties, which like really defined how I get through things. During the last 2 episodes, to hear very hurtful things shared so publicly that my own family had responded to with hostility, I buckled. Like my legs literally buckled from under me for when I was listening to that because I couldn't sleep. I'd wait until 5 a.m. to hear it. And I called my mom ultimately because she has not been able to approach any of this. And I was so grateful that she came out and, well, I flew her out. She stayed with me for a week. We listened to all of the episodes in a marathon. And like she showed me, pain and vulnerability that I hadn't seen before when it was happening. And we both got to do that to each other. So I wouldn't say that's good yet, but it's still improving. And through this process, it's right now difficult to be so vulnerable, to have to go back to work. And, this is not easy talk. Like, how was your weekend? Well, but, through this process, I've discovered a closeness with, people that I thought I lost when I was 18 and my dad kicked me out. And that was the same time that my sister was bringing Tina, now Morgan, to Guyana, which looks very purposeful. And so to have rediscovered them along with Cynthia and my mom, I have more than I started with. So in terms of how we're doing, hurt, healing, hopeful, I'm grateful for the interest that folks have, but my night is going back home to live this. So, my goal is to figure out what is the best that we can do. Yeah.
Shane, as I mentioned at the beginning, I have to say your strength is profound. And I cannot pretend to even dare to imagine what the event, first of all, 20 plus years ago, and then, swimming through it all again has been like. But I just wanted to also, I didn't know I'd get a chance to meet you. So I wanted to also say that the other big takeaway that I, as a listener, had was the dedication and power of your love through the ups and many downs of your family's collective experience. And I found that to be very inspiring. And it's another reason that I acknowledge it's painful now, but I think it's another reason why you have actually given all of us as listeners a really profound gift, right? Because again, in understanding each other as human beings, I know it's really easy to say like, wow, like how can a person stay in contact with a relative who's done X or Y, or how can a person, stand by a relative who's done, who's lied, this, that, and the other. Well, that's because that's what we do as people, right? And again, we don't know what's going to happen next, but I just wanted to say that my admiration for you is deep. And Sophia's I know you've said you were lucky to have her when you were young. She's lucky to have you now. So thank you for coming. Thank you. So I have one more question for you in particular, Amory, but before we get to it, I think what Shane was referring to in terms of the last episodes included a moment where you sort of finally lay your cards on the table about what you think after having reported all of this. So I just want to see if we can cue that up and listen to that moment.
I think that even if you did play a role in Marlene's murder, I don't think that means that you don't deserve to meet your son someday. Because I truly don't believe in quote unquote good people or bad people. I think we're all messed up in our own way. I really do. I don't think any of us is the worst thing we've ever done. And I think the only thing that makes any person irredeemable is if they don't own up to it.
It would be so much easier if I could just bring myself to say it, because it would stop all the fighting and heartache within my family. And I think everybody would accept it because it's what they've been told. But I cannot say what I didn't do. And I got found guilty on the truth, Amory. So ask me how I'm supposed to believe and accept that the truth is going to set you free when that's what I experienced first. The only reason I'm at this point now is because I have to do this for my own soul.
Amory, I'm glad you remembered we've known each other for 13 years because across that decade plus 3 years, this is one of the things that I have most admired about you and wish that I had in my own character, and that was this profound belief that human beings are complex, dynamic. We're not one thing or the other. We're not defined by our best moments, and we're not defined by our worst moments. I mean, this is a woman where when people, do things that she's struggling with, or like aren't, are mean to her or whatever, the most I've ever heard Amory say is, "It's frustrating." I'm right. But I mean, I just wonder, how has reporting this story, getting to know everyone, Shane, Sophia, has it had any impact on that core belief of yours about human beings? Have you changed?
Yes. I mean, I will never be the same making anything or doing anything or forming any kind of relationships or maybe even having a single conversation as I was at the beginning. And it's only become stronger. And we just contain multitudes. We do. And if we can stop putting each other in boxes and start trying to understand, well, they feel this way because, I think that they're seeing it this way because they maybe interpreted this as that. If we just try to actually acknowledge how messy we really are and how messy our interactions and relationships are, we will do ourselves a great service rather than labeling each other as good and bad. And I really felt that in this moment with Sophia. And if she really had nothing more to tell me, she had nothing more to tell me. But I didn't feel that, and I just felt like we had come so far. Like we really had. She had told me so much, and so if we weren't going to get there, I just wanted her to know. Or if we were going to get there, either way, I wanted her to know. I don't want to put you in a box. I never have. We've never had a. We had a professional relationship, but there was always a warmth to it coming from both directions. And that's all. All we can do is just try to see each other for all of our parts and all of the things that makes us say and do the things that we do, because, I screw up every single day of my life. And if someone is going to write me off because of it completely, I think that's terrible. I don't want to write you off if you do something. I don't want to write any of you off if you do something. And I don't want you to write me off if I screw up, because I'm going to screw up, and I have many times.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I am going to say thank you to you, Amory. Thank you to you, Zac.
Thank you.
We're not quite done yet, but I'm going to exit here in a second. Thank you, Shane, for coming.
Yes, thank you, Shane.
And thank you all for being here. I did go a little bit long, but you've been a tremendous audience. I could actually feel your focus and energy this whole time, and I'm grateful for that. And above all, I am grateful for your support of the kind of journalism and the organizations like ZSP Media, like WBUR, that makes podcasts like Amory's happen. It is absolutely true. We cannot do it without you. So thank you so much tonight. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Amory.
Thank you. Thank you, Zac. Thank you, Meghna. I need to thank some people. I want to acknowledge the whole team that made this. Ben Brock Johnson, I mentioned him. Samata Joshi, our managing producer. Liz Stiles, another managing producer here in spirit. Shannon Dooling, who you saw on video, another reporter on this. Oh my God, Sophie Codner. This would not have gotten finished without Sophie Codner, who's here all the way from San Francisco for one night only. Thank you so much. My dad is here tonight, and I will cry if I keep talking about him. So, my dad, I'm going to keep talking about him anyway, though, so let's just get really vulnerable. When I was listening to voice memos from Shane and Sophia's dad, my dad has always been the opposite of that, and I know how lucky I am to have had that in my life. So it just needs to be said that I was always aware that I was set up very differently in life than the real people you meet in this story. And I just thank you, Dad. I don't even know where you are, but thank you for being physically here and always here every day of my life. Okay. And one more person I'll cry if I talk too much about, and that is Mike Moschetto, who is my musical partner in life and all things. And there's one more thing to do, of course, which is to play you out of the show the way that you were played out of every episode. So I'm going to bring him back up here. And we're just going to really hope that I don't screw this up. Or you. No. Okay. Ready? Thank you so much.